Well, if there's one person who had a good morning on Emmy nominations day, it was Mandell Winter. He received two nominations for his work as a supervising sound editor, one for Deadwood the movie and the other for True Detective. I'm Zach Laws of Gold Derby, and with me now is Mandell Winter. Let me first start by asking you, not only did you get two Emmy nominations this year, but these are your first Emmy nominations ever. What did that kind of recognition mean for you? And I mean, were you surprised to see yourself in there twice?
Absolutely. It was a very surreal morning. I was not expecting it at all. And so it's truly remarkable and it's great.
So let me first start off by asking you about Deadwood, because
Sure.
you're new to the Deadwood team.
Yes.
Talk a bit about, I mean, first of all, were you a fan of the series? How did you get involved with working on this one?
I originally was just going to come on as the ADR supervisor, working with Ben Cook. He was slated to be the sound supervisor, but as schedules change and shift, he became no longer available and recommended that I take on the show, and I co-supervised with Daniel Coleman.
So then talk a bit about, because obviously this is based on, it's a continuation of a beloved television series. What were sort of the directives for you in terms of what people wanted for a soundscape and things like that?
They wanted it to be familiar. They wanted it to sound like Deadwood. But at the same time, we were given the direction to make it a more larger scale, to make it feel more like a movie. So we went in that direction as well. But we used a lot of the same sounds as were used in the series.
So just expand on that a little bit. When you say used a lot of the same sounds that were used in the series, give us some examples. What kinds of things did you?
Yeah, a lot of original recordings were done by Ben Cook during the series because he worked on the series. So we had a lot of the horses, wagons, the raised boardwalks, the doors from the set. A lot of those ambiances. We had a rich library to pull from, and Daniel was able to really create rich backgrounds and fill out Deadwood.
In terms of doing it on a larger scale, can you explain what you mean by that and what that entailed?
It was a balance, trying to find, do we play more music? Do we not play more music? It was finding that balance. It was also finding a balance with the loop group, because populating Deadwood took quite a bit of work. You needed a lot of loop group to fill that town up. It's not something you can pull from the library.
Considering how beloved this show was, and you being new to this, did you feel any kind of, obviously, I mean, you're not a part of the cast, so you don't have to worry about being on screen, but I mean, you are a major off-screen contributor to this. Did you feel any sort of pressure to get it right?
Absolutely. Authenticity was key. We really wanted to make sure that we were honest with the viewer, and the audience loves this show, so we wanted it to really be Deadwood, and didn't want to compromise on that. So we were leaning into making sure it was the appropriate sounds for the time. We didn't want anything to sound modern. We wanted everything to feel appropriate.
Well, if someone were to ask you, which I just am about to, point to a specific moment of your own work that you think, whether it's a scene or a stretch of something that you think typifies the kind of work that you do at its very best.
In Deadwood,
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a tough one. There's so many good scenes. I think there's one in particular when we're in the gem, where Swearingen and is meeting with Senator Hearst, and we're trying to keep the gem alive, and we're really looking at the people inside and wanting to build that up and feel Deadwood alive around them. It's really kind of laying the stakes. So it's using the fine tip brush to really paint the picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting, the sort of cacophony of sounds that you have to arrange in something like this. I wonder, how do you make these decisions about, what to hear and when? I mean, what is most important to hear in a particular scene?
A lot of it is based on the story. We always lean into the story, always lean into what our characters are saying and talking about. We never want to distract. We want to help set the mood, and the geography of the scene and what they're interacting with. So that we really lean into story and make sure that we are conscious of that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit about True Detective. Now, you had worked on the second season as well.
Yes.
What were some major differences in terms of sound? Were there major differences in terms of sound between season 2 and season 3?
Yes, there are big differences. With season 2, it was more inner city, and season 3 we're out in the rural country of Arkansas. So, and working on True Detective, it's an exercise in restraint. You really, every sound that we hear in True Detective is there for a reason. And again, it's painting with the fine tip brush.
Right. So talk a little bit just about this being set out in a rural area. What kinds of sounds were you looking for to paint a picture of the environment that we're in?
Well, we had quite a bit of insects already in the dialogue track. So one of the things that we were like, embrace the insects that are there. We didn't necessarily need to add too many more, but we kind of, it's a minimalist sort of approach on True Detective, where we lean into the tension of the story a little bit more than some other stories. And so atmospherically, it's a lot of winds and tones.
Mm-hmm. Now, you are nominated specifically for the episode The Great War in Modern Memory. Can you talk a bit about why you chose to submit that specific episode?
We chose that episode because it had great transitions between the 3 timelines. It also really sets up what to expect in the series. And it had just such a nice sonic tapestry throughout that really gave us quite a bit to work with. So we thought it represented our work very well.
Same question as with Deadwood. Could you point to a specific moment within this episode that you think best typifies your work?
Well, I think there's one towards the end where Hearst is the town turns on Hearst, and it is quite an interesting surreal moment where we kind of go into Hearst's perspective on the ground as the crowd kind of overtakes him.
Oh, I actually meant with True Detective, but I like that answer for Deadwood as well. I didn't want to interrupt you because you gave a really good answer about the other one too. So,
but okay,
yeah. So True Detective.
True Detective. That's another tough one. I really like the scene where we're transitioning from the boy through the different timelines, where we're focusing on the spokes of his tire, and it goes into the wristwatch, into the clock in the room. And it's just this really interesting movement through the different time periods.
Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting about these 2 different shows, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong about your intentions here, but there's sort of a surreal nature to True Detective that Deadwood doesn't necessarily have. Like, Deadwood feels more like it's based in a reality that we all know, whereas True Detective sort of plays on sort of surrealism and expressionism sometimes in the soundscape. Was that an intention of yours for that?
I think in Deadwood, it's definitely naturalistic recordings and trying to be authentic to the time period. We had a similar intention with True Detective, but we also play, since it's essentially about memory loss, we kind of play with that a little bit, especially when Mahershala Ali starts seeing the ghosts of his wife, and we really played with it there too.
That's interesting. I mean, can you just talk a little bit more about how you express the memory loss through sound?
Our sound designer, David Esparza, created these really cool sounds with a program called Kima that really kind of played with the memory loss and him being haunted by the ghost of his wife.
Mm-hmm. In both of these cases, and in your work in general, you do a lot of film in addition to your TV work. How do you work with the people, the directors, the writers, the producers, in order to best achieve what they want?
I first watch the film and talk to them about it and find out where their sensibilities are, what they're leaning into and what they prefer. And then we'll talk concept and bigger ideas, like if I see it, I know to cover it. But if there's something larger, if there's a motivation for this character to behave in a certain way, I kind of want to know that ahead of time. So that way we can approach the sound in that way too.
While I have you, I actually wanted to ask you about another project that you worked on for this year, the Muhammad Ali documentary, What's My Name? Can you just talk a bit about, in terms of like working on a documentary, how does something like that differ from your work on works of fiction like Deadwood and True Detective?
Well, it's interesting because that one was primarily archival footage, so it required quite a bit of just restoration work. And then we also added quite a bit. We wanted the crowds to feel a little wider than just the mono recordings. So we had to take our crowd recordings and then EQ them in a way or treat them in a way that would make them sound appropriate to the archival footage. So it was, again, instead of having pristine sound, how do we make the sound appropriate for to match the archival footage?
Mm-hmm.
So it was making it differently, yeah.
Yeah. Last question before I let you go. Are you hoping that on Emmy night, when you're at the Creative Arts ceremony, are you going to have to check the envelope to make sure that to know who to thank in your speech? Because if you get it for either Deadwood or True Detective, which one are you going to?
I'll have speeches for both.
Yeah.
I'll have speeches for both, and I'll double check.
I guess it'll help that, the other people will be on stage with you too, so you can.
Yeah, I'll just look around.
All these people. Yeah. Mandell, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on your nominations.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, of course. And thanks to all you at home for watching. Make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons below, and make sure you visit us at goldderby.com for all the latest Emmy news.